So the Black Hawk Down thing, Ron, it really made Bill Clinton risk averse. He got to a point where he really needed to put the big guns in there, and then he realized that he was getting cold feet, and he pulled out, and we lost some Americans, and it was really an ugly, black eye for the United States of America.
It was a
So
real
I
humiliation. It,
it
it
was
brought
like
us right back to the Carter era.
he did. He took us right back. And again, the beat in the military, they sensed that immediately, is that he didn't know how to use this. He wasn't going to use this for the right reasons. And then I got in the White House, and I confirmed all those things. In my, I didn't confirm them to him, but I was, in my mind, I'm going, this is exactly right. This guy, that's why the name of the first book is Dereliction of Duty. This guy was derelict in his duties to be our commander in chief in the USA needs and should get way much more for our taxpayer dollars than a guy who simply wants to deploy the military or not deploy the military based solely on what his poll balance is going to be. And that's what we had under Clinton. And we sure as hell had that under Biden.
Hello, Culminators. Coming to you from Newark on a 100-degree day with a red-hot episode. Today we're going to be talking to Buzz Patterson. And as this is in the category of longtime fan, first-time caller for us. We've been online friends for a very long time, but never hung out quite like this before. He's all the way out there in California, living the dream. Buzz is what we call a great American, folks. Husband, dad, speaker, author, pilot, former carrier of the nuclear football. He wrote nuke because he needed characters. They don't call it that. Red State columnist, although I think maybe he hasn't been posted on Red State for a while, unless I'm missing something. New York Times best-selling author times two. Nothing changes. This book is from when? 2004? Reckless, how liberal Democrats undercut our military, endanger our soldiers, and jeopardize our security. Nothing changes. But we're gonna talk about that sort of thing because Buzz and I are both people who like to see a strong America, and we like to see American strength deployed appropriately. But we're not afraid of its use either. And I always value talking to experienced servicemen, especially people who've reached high levels of achievement like Buzz, because one of the things that bothers me, Buzz, is this idea that if you haven't served, and not only was I never going to be any kind of pilot, but between my eyesight and just my utter lack of pilot type personality or skills or aptitude, but I was unlike my dad, who was in the Army Reserve and was called up during the Berlin crisis. I was never in the service, typically of my time, especially people around my part of the country and my kind of family. There's this idea out there that people like me are not entitled to opinions because we haven't served. If those opinions suggest that as a matter of national interest, that we ought to deploy military forces. Does that make any sense to you?
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, just ironically, I actually went to the Air Force recruiter, Ron, to be an attorney. I had gotten into Georgetown Law School, and the Air Force was going to pay my way. And Reagan got elected for the first time, his first term, and they asked me if I wanted to be a pilot. And I thought, yeah, I'd give it a shot. And it ended up, I never went to law school. I've been flying airplanes for 36 years. So I think I made the right decision. But no, I don't think there's any prerequisite for citizens and our elected politicians, Ron, to have any kind of military experience. I think it's incumbent upon military veterans like me to be there to give an opinion and to say, hey, this is what I saw, and this is the wisdom that I learned over those years. But no, I don't think you necessarily. I think, for example, President Trump's a tremendous commander in chief. He went to military school, as I think like in high school, maybe a
Yeah.
prep school. But he didn't have any military experience. But he has surrounded himself with people that do, and they know what the hell they're doing.
And he
Uh,
takes his responsibility seriously. He obviously is someone who understands, the accusation leveled against people who are not veterans is you don't know what, well, either, again, the idea that if you yourself are not personally affected, you can't have an opinion about a policy is asinine. That's a throwback to only women can have opinions on abortion. I'm
right,
sorry. I'm a moral human. My
right.
IQ is probably higher than yours, not Buzz's, but to me. And here's what I think we ought to do. I'm not asserting the power to make anyone do that, uh, but I do think that President Trump really has a very humane understanding of what it means to send people to war. That he takes
Yeah.
that responsibility very seriously.
Well, I think he grasps it, and this is one of the reasons why I write the books that I write, Ron, or that I work for a guy who didn't take that responsibility personally and seriously, and he considered military personnel to be props in a political campaign or props toward his polls, and he never really understood what it meant to be in a cockpit, in a foxhole, in a tank, in a ship. And I think Trump has a visceral understanding, a deep-seated understanding of what it means to take care of people and what it means to serve, whether you serve in uniform or not. And I think that, I don't care what your rank is in the military, Ron, we can sniff out leadership versus management in a heartbeat. And
Even in
you've
the
got
Air
to be,
Force?
even in the Air Force.
Yeah,
We have a lot of,
I think of the Air Force as the most corporate of the services. Am
well,
I right?
that's why I stood out. I was actually a leader and not a manager, because I had and all my peers were managers, so really wasn't that hard. I think you're exactly right. The Air Force has gotten way too corporate, and over the years, and I think that, thank God again, President Trump and Pete Hegseth and Raising Kane or General Kane are making that culture change. And boy, did we need it! Boy, did we need it!
So your accusation, and you are certainly in a position to know. Just in case it's not clear to anyone uh, watching or listening to this, Buzz was in the White House with the Clintons, and as someone carrying the football, he was very much the fly on the wall. I remember being very defensive, and I voted for Bill Clinton once, uh, and I thought of him as a moderate Democrat, and of course, compared to today's Democrats, I would say that he is, except that he has in no way, he's not done or said anything that could pull his party back to moderation. So what that tells me is that he's a person with no beliefs, no
All right.
principles. But I remember many times, and I'm probably, if someone wanted to check my X archive for this, they could find this, really being offended by the idea that a president of the United States, including Bill Clinton, would actually launch or deploy military assets for purely political purposes. I was naive about that, wasn't I?
You were. And I saw that from both sides of the coin, Ron. So I was actually, in the Air Force as a pilot, a squadron commander, before I was offered the White House position. So I flew under Bill Clinton at the Air Force level. So I was involved in the Black Hawk Down situation in Mogadishu. I was involved in Haiti. I was involved, in the first Gulf War crisis, Gulf War under President H.W. Bush. So I'd seen all those operations from the warfighter warfighter side, right? Yeah, I was a squadron commander during the Bosnia operation in '94, also under Clinton. So I saw that from that perspective. And then a couple of years later, I was actually living in the White House with an office and a bedroom and going everywhere he went, carrying the nuclear football, and sitting in on the meetings and listening to the phone calls. And I mean, he'd ask me an occasional question, but I wasn't there to be a military advisor. You know, he had a chairman, he had a SecDef, he had all those guys. They weren't great. They didn't do a great job, but he had those guys to go to. But he would ask me the occasional question, and in 9 times out of 10, it was basically designed on. So the Black Hawk Down thing, Ron, it really made Bill Clinton risk averse. He got to a point where he really needed to put the big guns in there, and then he realized that he was getting cold feet, and he pulled out, and we lost some Americans, and it was really an ugly, black eye for the United States of America.
It was a
So
real
I
humiliation. It
was
brought
like
us right back to the Carter era.
he did. He took us right back. And again, the beat in the military, they sensed that immediately, is that he didn't know how to use this. He wasn't going to use this for the right reasons. And then I got in the White House and I confirmed all those things. In my, I didn't confirm them to him, but I was, in my mind, I'm going, this is exactly right. This guy, that's why the name of the first book is Dereliction of Duty. This guy was derelict in his duties to be our commander in chief in the USA needs and should get way much more for our taxpayer dollars than a guy who simply wants to deploy the military or not deploy the military based solely on what his poll bounce is going to be. And that's what we had under Clinton. And we sure as hell had that under Biden.
Well, Biden, I mean, whatever the heck that means. Let's talk about Obama, which is probably what that means. Obama, he used quite a bit of ordnance in his time.
He did.
Better than Clinton. I know, of course, you weren't in the White House with Obama, but from your perspective, was he any better than Clinton?
Yeah, Obama's a real enigma because Obama was better than Clinton for the military. I mean, he did a lot of social experimentation in the military that wasn't successful. But in terms of the fact, he did reach out and touch people. I mean, he did all sorts of clandestine strikes against terror leaders around the world, to include American citizens.
Now,
and of course,
let's stick a pin in that because let's not stick a pin in it. Let's talk about it right now. I've had a lot of people on this program who have told me about Obama's contempt for America and his subversive worldview, and yet he clearly did do those sorts of things. He did continue the process that resulted in the death of Osama bin Laden. Just making that observation, back to that enigma.
That's why he's an enigma. He also did a great job with the border. He did a great job in terms of deportations. Now, he didn't do a great job sealing up the border, but he did a great job with deportations, for a while. But he would reach out, touch people. He didn't really want to engage U.S. troops overseas, which I think is great. I mean, if we don't have a clear and distinct, delineated end game and mission that affects the United States of America, we shouldn't get involved, which is the Trump-Hegseth, formula, which I 100% applaud. And Obama liked to use the technology, but he didn't want to use the boots, which I have no problem with. Clinton wanted to do both. And then Biden didn't really want to do anything. So, I think Obama was better than Clinton. That's why I wrote my third book, Conduct Unbecoming, because I compared Clinton and Obama as commanders in chief and how they affected the military. And I still talk about the shortcomings of Obama. He wasn't great, but he was definitely better than Clinton and definitely better than Biden in terms of how the military sees him.
And then you've got the Bushes.
Mm.
Did you return to active duty after you left the Clinton White House?
Yeah, so my last tour was Clinton's last couple of years and Bush's first. So I was a commander at the Air Force Academy. So I left the White House and went to the Air Force Academy in Colorado and commanded the cadets at the Air Force Academy for 3 years. So Clinton left office, Bush came in. So I retired under Bush, which at the time I really didn't want Clinton's signature on my retirement certificate, to be honest with you.
Really?
We had a lot of guys and girls in the military that were separating that didn't want that signature either. I mean, it's the auto pen, right? But anyway, I didn't want Clinton on my retirement, and Bush Jr. came in, and I thought this is great. And I thought Bush Bush Jr. was a great commander in chief initially, and then he got caught up into, in my estimation, he got caught up into the same thing, trying to placate and kowtow to, you know. The neocons in his party and some of his advisors were not the best in my opinion. But yeah, Bush had a compassion for the troops, and the troops loved Bush. I mean, he'd get out there and jog with them, and that's another thing that Hegseth does, which I think is just brilliant. I don't know if you want to talk about Hegseth at all, but I
Sure.
mean,
I've got,
we
yeah.
have we haven't had a sec def in my lifetime, and I'm 69. We haven't had a sec def in my lifetime that came straight out of the troops. He's just a line guy. He's just like me. He's a major in the U.S. Army. B, he's telling 4 stars where to go and what to do, which I think is we needed that. That's a very refreshing cultural change. And C, he's out there every single morning, Ron, doing PT with the guys. He's running. He's doing, he's out there as the sec def, and I cannot tell you what that translates into in terms of just pure loyalty and love and faith.
So let
And
me ask you to
yeah,
explain something because I'm an old Cold War warrior. I'm interested in military history, but a lot of people, and plus I hang out, as you know, with a lot of military guys, Schlichter and cynical. Explain to people the cultural sort of and the class differences you're talking about. In other words, you say Pete Hegseth, well, he comes right out of the line. He's a major. So most people think a major, that's an officer. That's not an enlisted man. And then you talked about how he's telling 4 star. First of all, how many 4 star officers do we have in the military today?
too many. Uh,
Ridiculous number.
yeah,
Hundreds, right?
yes, hundreds, and we need about 20.
And
And yeah, and Hegseth's going after him. And again, that's the other thing. But yeah, I mean, so just for your viewers, Ron, a major is a mid-level manager, basically. I mean, we manage risk and we manage violence and we manage as a major. We manage a lot of operational stuff, but we don't get paid the big bucks like the general officers do. And we have for far too long we've hired SecDefs that were right off of boards of Raytheon or McDonnell Douglas or Lockheed Martin. They're retired 3 star, 4 star guys that are getting paid handsomely to do consulting or lobbyists, that kind of thing. And we put those guys in leadership positions, and they have absolutely no relationship, zero relationship with the troops. None. And the troops know that.
how
And
does
that's
but how does that happen? They've just been so far from command situations where they're interacting with operational personnel that they've lost it. I mean, you
yeah,
can't go. We all. I mean, everyone understands. We don't live in a time where people move from enlisted to the officer corps. We don't have battlefield commissions. You come into the service either as an officer or as an enlisted soldier or airman or whatever, sailor, or you come in as an officer. It's a different track altogether, and it's
right.
understood that officers are not going to necessarily have all that much to do, except maybe in the early years of their career. Like you were commanding cadets, so of course you're also dealing with young guys who are about to to enter into entry level. Even, of course, in the Air Force is a little bit different because you don't have the infantry as such. people go right into. But my point is, people who are majors, there's a world of difference between a major and a general, and much less, and even a brigadier. And
Yeah.
brigadiers are basically colonels who get another promotion.
Right.
It's not your there's gigantic gradeflation in the U.S. military. Tremendous, and there's all these, there's lots of politics. People, it's really hard for people who don't pay attention to this to understand how much is at play here. And Trump really shook up the Pentagon, and Hegseth is in the process still of doing so. All these people threatening to quit, and some of them did quit. Explain the role of the civilian cadres in the Department of Defense and the consultants. I mean, they're as influential to a large extent as people who are actually in uniform, right?
Yes, let me a couple points, Ron. Yeah, great, actually, great points. The way that the way the Constitution is written is that the military is civilian controlled, right? And I think that's essential, and that's the way it should be. And I always respected that, and I always will. What's happened though is that over the years, because of that, like you said, brigadier generals just kind of assumed after 06 you're going to get 07, but beyond that it becomes real political, and you have to be a politician if you're going to be a 2, 3, 4 star in today's military. I don't care what service you're talking about. You're going to become a politician, and you lose that connection. Most of them, I'm not going to say all of them, because I worked for some really phenomenal general officers, but most of them were there because they were political, and they'd schmooze the right people, and they said the right things. So that's been a kind of part of the problem that Hegseth is going to root out too. Secondly, about the Air Force. Did you know, Ron? I think you're exactly right. The Air Force is different from the Army, Navy, and Marines, but the Air Force is the only force that sends. The only people who go to combat are officers. Everybody that's back in the background are support personnel. They're the enlisted guys for the most part. So, like the B-2 guys, they're officers. The F-16s, the F-22s that flew them over there, officers. And so we have a little bit different cultural makeup, because the O's go to war and the E's support the O's, which is a little bit different. Normally, it's the O's supporting the E's that go to war. So there's that aspect. But ultimately, I think that Hegseth has realized that we needed a cultural change. For far too long we've allowed the lobbyists, the cadre of civilian personnel working in the Pentagon right now is just like the civilian personnel working in the State Department or the FBI or CIA. I mean, they're there forever. They're bureaucrats. Once they get in, you have a hell of a time getting them out, and they're incestuous, and they're very obvious about who they support. And Hegseth's trying to get rid of the politicization of the Pentagon. I saw it happening, Ron, when I was in the Clinton White House. That was one of the first red flares that went up was, hey man, this political system and the way we do our military is really screwed up on both sides. I saw it from the warfighter aspect, but I didn't realize just how screwed up it was from the Washington D.C. aspect. And we've allowed lobbyists and professional consultants to get in there and take over. And once you get them in there and they start getting paid handsomely, it's a hell of a time to get them out.
I notice a lot of my friends really come down hard on these general officers who go onto boards of defense contractors after retirement. Like, that's a red flag.
Yeah. And it's just an accepted. So here it's an accepted career path, Ron, which is
Sure.
part of the problem. Yeah, my dad was retired 2-star, so I can say this with personal experience. And my dad retired as a 2-star. He had a 2-year non-compete clause, or a 2-year I can't work for anybody clause.
He couldn't go over to the Russians.
He couldn't go away. Yeah, he had to hang out for a couple of years, and then he was getting contracts on him left and right. by all the normal, usual suspects. It was Raytheon and General Dynamics and all those people. So I saw from my dad's perspective, and he wasn't going to turn the money down, but I saw, okay, this is kind of weird. He knew that was his next career, was just waiting for 2 years on a beach in Florida until he could actually consult again and start making the big bucks. So,
and after all, someone with those attainments has extraordinary expertise to lend
right.
to industry that is serving the people who answer to people like your father.
Yes, and my dad was a special ops guy, Air Force Special Operations Commander, AFSOC guy. I mean, commander. He had some really interesting insight, and I mean, a lot of companies would pay him to come in. He was one of those guys that did the black world stuff, the radars and the how to defeat EMP and that kind of thing. He's passed, God bless him, but yeah, I mean, it's in most generals. Like, for example, I got out as an 06. I was promoted 06 and I got out. And one of the reasons why I got out is I kind of wanted a life. I knew that if I didn't get out, I was going to be a general, and then my only path forward, at age 60 something, was going to be going and doing the consulting gig, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep flying airplanes and be who I am. But most guys, and my peers are perfect. All the other military aides I work with in the White House, Ron, the other four services, with one exception, all those guys became 2, 3, 4-star generals, in the military. All great guys, but they realized they were in for the long haul and they didn't want to do anything else. And I think that's, you got to cut out the deadwood at some point.
Well, I mean, you definitely took a more challenging path. Writing books, I haven't really been able to spit out a book I mean, there was a period about 25 years ago when I was writing a lot more, and I did write a couple of books, some under my name, some as a group author. But first of all, I think Twitter ruined me. I don't know if other than legal work, if I can put together anything that long and coherent anymore. But still, right? That's of course you've got a military pension, and you got that, you got the junior bird before you retired, so there's a pension there. But still, compared to the upside of going into consulting, for the defense industry, a much riskier path. And nonetheless, you've had a couple of bestsellers, so that that's worked out for you. And you get to write, why do you say I wanted to keep flying planes? I mean, if you were a retired consultant, you're flying privately, right? It's civil aviation stuff.
Well, yeah, but you have to retire at 65. So when I got out of the Air Force, I was 41. So I went to fly for Delta, knowing I had a limited time to fly for Delta as well. So I was a Delta
you flew
guy.
as a commercial pilot?
Yeah. So I did 20 years in the Air Force and then 15 at Delta.
Oh, no one talks about that in any of your bios. To me,
Well,
as an avid consumer of aviation videos, that would have interested me as much as the military, because that's a fascinating world in and of itself.
I loved it. It was different. I can honestly say there's really, a flying hour in the Air Force is not equal to a flying hour at Delta, because, the Delta is basically your glorified bus driver, whether you're going international, or I decided I just wanted to be domestic. So I was flying LAX to the coasts, both coasts, and down into Central America. And I enjoyed that, but it wasn't the same as flying the 82nd Airborne into Grenada, or the Delta Force into a special operations thing in Cairo, Egypt. I mean, those were.
But I can tell you, as a passenger, we love the idea that our commercial pilots are former military.
Yeah.
Because, like, for you to look at that responsibility as being a glorified bus driver, that gives us a lot of comfort.
Well, it's different. And I was really blessed, because at Delta, I think that when I got there, about 75% of the guys were military, ex-military, just some phenomenal guys, Air Force One guys, Air Force Two guys, nuclear carrier of the nuclear football guy. I mean, we had some interesting characters. I think it's gotten a little. There's not as many military guys coming out anymore, so there's more and more of the puppy farm guys coming and girls coming up through. These like United has one, Delta has one. Well, they'll start you from scratch, and they'll give you time flying on a regional until you get your 1,500 hours, and they'll pluck you in the right seat. Unfortunately, some of those guys and girls are not nearly as educated and experienced as those grizzled veterans that come in after 20 years of flying internationally like I did, or flying in a combat with an F-22. So, but it's still interesting, and most of the guys are great. Most of the guys are great, and girls are great. And there were very few times I flew commercially. I can say that. I thought that the guy next to me just shouldn't have really be there. I had that a couple times in the Air Force too, so it wasn't a big deal. But yeah, I mean, it was always nice flying commercially, because I would always try to interact with the peeps, and let them know that I had a good handle on what was going on, and it was going to be as smooth as I could possibly make it. And which is another thing, when I was in the military, it was just, let's get the 82nd Airborne in and out and let's go home. And with Delta, it was, how smoothly can you land? That was what the thing was.
I mean, if you've ever, most people have not really ever appreciated what the inside of a paratrooper transport looks like. It's not just a green version of Spirit Airlines.
No. It's very austere. And in fact, once I flew a mission when I was flying 140. I flew C-141s for the most time in the Air Force, and I was flying from Tacoma, Washington. We did a 6-ship of 141s packed with paratroopers in the back of the airplane, and we flew for 18 hours, 3 air refuelings, and dropped those suckers on the border of Czechoslovakia. And I've never seen an airplane full of more miserable human beings than those guys that were stuck in those red seats in the back of a 141, freezing their butt off for 18 hours, and then having to get out and jump out of the airplane in the middle of the night. Thank God I'm a pilot. I can never do that. So, but those guys did it, and I was happy to drop them.
That's why they're called grunts,
Exactly.
So speaking of combat, you and I are talking when in the shadow or in the glow, depending on how you want to look at it, of the most extraordinary week of the execution of modern day air power in admittedly a profoundly asymmetrical power balance environment. But as somebody who left the Air Force before the stealth era, really, or just in the when it's really kind of coming in, it'd be more your dad's cup of tea anyway. But your mind must have been blown over the last couple of weeks between the Israeli Air Force and the U.S. Air Force, just the magic.
Yes. Yeah, I'm trying to explain this to my followers on X, just exactly what we have accomplished, because it blows my military mind away, and I don't think that a lot of Americans have truly grasped what we did. I mean, we flew these B-2s, took off from right outside of Kansas City, flew all the way to Iran. Probably they had 2 air refuelings each way, and air refuelings are, I can tell you from personal experience, they are very tense, and if you don't get the gas, you don't continue. And can you imagine if the B-2s had to divert because they couldn't get the gas, how embarrassing that would have been? So no, these guys made it all the way to Iran, bombs on target precisely, and did the exact same thing going all the way back home. 36 hours. 2 guys, 36 hours each airplane. Is truly phenomenal. And they don't have don't have crew rest facilities in those airplanes. They are basically laying down in a little alleyway with a Walmart cot right behind the cockpit. Tremendous. And now, so I think it's going to be studied, Ron, in military schools for the rest of our history. I think it was just that brilliant.
That's the U.S. piece of it.
Yeah, but I was going to get to the Israeli piece.
Oh, okay, right.
The Israeli, I've never seen the prepping of a battleground like the Israelis did with Iran. What they did, they basically took over air superiority in about a day. They took out the most important assets, which the Iranian Air Force, quite frankly, is crap. But they did have some nice airplanes. And so they took out the F-18s. They took out some stuff that we knew that they had, but we knew their pilots weren't very good. Took that stuff out. Then the Israelis took out not all of them, but most of them. The air traffic radar, the warning system radars, all the things that would give the Iranian government any kind of heads up that anybody else was coming. They did all of that. They prepped it like I've never seen any battlefield prepped without boots on the ground, right? This is all through the air. Again, there are two great air forces in the world. I'm going to say, because I'm biased, the U.S. is number one. The Israelis are number two. And we used to do a lot of training with those guys. We worked with, we exercised. I know I had one of those guys personally live with me for a while. They're just tremendous people and did a great job. And it's not over yet. I don't want people to get crazy. It's not over yet. We may have to do it again, but Israel's not going to relent. I really hope that we just put this thing to an end, and hopefully the Iranian people will realize this is their opportunity and step up and erase 46 years since 1979 of Sharia rule, brutal rule in Iran, and Iran being the number one state sponsor of terror in the world, and probably in the world's history.
Now, one thing about Obama, again, going back to that enigmatic nature of his outlook, there are two issues with him and Iran, and I only came to appreciate the second one fairly recently. The first one was this concept that Iran should be the hegemon in the Mideast, that would be a better outcome for America, or whatever the heck his agenda is. Because again, me, the old naif, believing that he wants to do his job and he thinks somehow America will benefit. And by the way, it's not so crazy to say he may have believed in the old détente conception that if we open up channels with this country, it'll be two-way communication, and they will moderate and they will become more normal, whereas Saudi Arabia, that could never be. I don't know why he's okay. That's number one. Number two, though, the extent of Iranian infiltration into the State Department and into sensitive areas that continued just until recently. I mean, Muslim Brotherhood affiliated people working in sensitive areas. It's mind-boggling to me that there wasn't, as far as I know, has been so much tolerance for this.
Yeah, you know what? I think there's a disconnect, Ron, with the democratic mindset when it comes to national security and international affairs. And again, I saw this, and that's why I started writing books. I saw this under Clinton, and it got exponentially worse under Obama. And then, of course, we don't even know who was in charge of the Biden White House. But the Clintons and the Obamas and the Bidens always thought they could appease enemies like Iran by simply allowing them to pursue their own goals, and by assisting in those goals. Obama probably more than anybody else was responsible for the attack, the Hamas attacks in Israel, because of the money that he sent, that he freed up. 1.7, I think it might have even been more, but I think it was at least 1.7 billion Obama sent to Tehran when he was still in office. That a high percentage of that went to Hamas and Hezbollah and to the nuclear weapon development. So I think Obama has his hands dirty in that, and again, goes back to the appeasement thing, and I'm a big fan of Reagan, and I'm a big fan of Trump, and I am as a military guy at 20 years, I am all about peace through strength. And if we're not projecting and reaching every single day as a country and showing other countries what we can do, then we are failing. And I think that for every step forward we take, sometimes with countries like Iran, Democrats will come in and move us two steps back. And I think that's counterproductive. And I know that Israel believes that. I think that that's why I'm just very happy that Trump's an Israel ally, and that we're going to help the Israelis, and we can't. I'm just hoping that this doesn't get undone, Ron, in 3 years.
3 years, okay, but I don't know by the time we finish recording what the hell it's going to look like on the ground.
Right.
But you mentioned Democrats. There's something going on the Republican side that's very unsettling. There's this idea. It's nothing more than the old-fashioned isolationism we learned about, in history. We learned about in high school, and where people thought that if we leave everyone else alone, they'll leave us alone too. And that was wrong in the 1930s. But at least in the 1930s, you could imagine, hey, we're an agricultural country, we're an industrial country, we can make what we need. We don't need anyone else in the world. We don't want immigrants. It's 2025. The world is interconnected.
Yeah.
If people think that that America first means no exercise of American power unless it's in the Gulf of America, unless it's in national waters. I mean, by that same logic, I suppose they would probably even reject the Monroe Doctrine. Well, guess what? Your life's going to change. Your family's life is going to change. Your ability to put food on the table, it's all interconnected. Am I some kind of AIPAC shill for saying that? I mean, now you don't hold yourself out as a political analyst, but now we're just a couple of guys who have opinions on X. What do you think about that?
Well, again, having seen this from both sides, I don't think that peace through strength means sitting back with our hands and sitting on our hands. I think it means us projecting and being there and being able to reach. And I can't express how much reach we have when a couple of guys can take off from Kansas City, Missouri, and drop bunker busters in Tehran and get all the way back to Kansas. I mean, that is reach. We reached out and smacked them right in the face. And we're not at war with Iran, not yet. And I don't think we will. I think you're probably right. I think in a couple of weeks, this is going to be over. I mean, the worst case scenario for me, I think, is that we may have to go back in one more time. We, the U.S., have to go back in. Israel's going to keep pounding. They're going to keep punching. It's going to be great. And they're going to put Iran into submission. They're almost there. The Ayatollahs on the run. They tried this stunt yesterday in Qatar and it didn't work. And worst case scenario, Ron, we might have to go back in with the B-2s one more time and just make sure that those sites are once and for all done. Until we get the BDA, the bomb damage assessment, we're not going to know. That takes weeks because you got to look at satellite imagery, and you're looking at Mossad's on the ground, so they'll get some eyes on target, I'm sure, to figure out what's going on there. So worst case scenario for the U.S., we've done our job, but we might have to go in and do it one more time. Israel's going to continue to pound. I think Iran's on their knees, and and if the Ayatollah doesn't, he's 86, he's got cancer, so I don't know if the guy really cares. But if he doesn't come to the table soon, I think that this is going to be a ripe time for a revolution in Tehran. And I've got some really, really close friends that are Iranian who got forced out as children during the Shah being deposed, and they really want their country back, and they've got a lot of relatives there that want their country back too. So, it's going to be interesting, but I think this is such a pivotal time in the region, and I've flown over there since 1983. So, yeah, I'm really, really, I welcome this. But God willing, here we go.
Buzz, I think you and I could talk for hours. There's just so much that's so interesting. And it's really great hearing your perspective on this. I thank you for joining me and culminating for a little bit. We will stay in touch as we always do. Your voice is respected, common sense, based on experience, and cheerful. Catch you later, Buzz.
I'll see you, Ron. Thanks so much,
Bye.
man.